Folks, I did a story a while ago that I think I titled it Connecting the Dots or something to that nature. But it was basically a video that I did that basically connected the dots between Russia and Putin and Donald Trump. Now, there were quite a few dots and only a few connections at that point in time. But the dots are being connected slowly, but they're being connected. The Huffington Post just came out with a story titled, "Trump campaign had at least 18 undisclosed contacts with Russians," sources say. Now, back in November, December, when this particular subject started to come to light, you had the lying, and I do believe the guy's a racist, but there's no real hard evidence about it, but he's definitely a liar. That's Mike Pence. And he went on the Sunday morning talk shows and was asked specifically if the Trump campaign had had any contact with the Russians. And he stated emphatically no. Well, we all know, just based on the confirmed information regarding Michael Flynn, that that was a lie. We also know at this point that there were at least 18 undisclosed contacts with the Russians. How do we know that? Because the Russians were being monitored by the FBI and the CIA, so that they knew that there was monkey business going on between the Trump campaign and the Russians. And specifically, they knew there was contact between Michael Flynn and Sergei, I believe the pronunciation is Kislyak. I think that's the pronunciation. If it's not, apologize for it. Anyway, with that being said, the Trump campaign then came clean about a couple of contacts that were made between Jefferson Beauregard Sessions and Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, and the Russians, but they claimed there were only like 3. Now, it's been revealed that there were 18 more. Now, we know damn well that somebody within the Trump campaign, and more than likely, if it wasn't Donald Trump himself, it had to be Mike Pence, knew about this stuff, but went on national TV and lied. Further, Mr. Pence went on national TV and continues to lie about not knowing about Mike Flynn's association both with the Turks and being a paid lobbyist for the Turkish government, and also being paid by Russian TV, which is just an arm of the Russian government. Mr. Flynn has stated that he told the Trump campaign specifically about his dealings with Turkey and his paid contact with the Russians. But Mr. Trump was emphatic about wanting him for the position. So now that we know that, well, we already knew that Donald Trump was a liar, and now we have solid proof that Mike Pence is a liar. This is getting worse and worse. Now, just try to remember these two names because they are going to be in the middle of a lot of this investigation, and they're not American names, they're Russian names. The first one is Sergei Kislyak. He is a Russian diplomat. He's their main Russian diplomat. And we know that part of his job is recruitment of spies in the United States and various other countries. We know that for a fact. That's just public knowledge. But the second name that a lot of people are not familiar with is the name Victor, I believe the pronunciation is Medvedchuk. Medvedchuk, that's how you pronounce it. Now, that's a name that a lot of people really don't know in this country. But I'm letting you know that Victor is Vladimir Putin's main operative. Anytime Vladimir Putin wants to get directly involved with something, he does not do it himself. He sends this guy out to do the actual dirty work, but it's all under the direction of Vladimir Putin, who happens to be the godfather for Mr. Medvedchuk's daughter, and has been a main contributor to the wealth of this man. So there is CIA, FBI transcripts, which we are not privy to, which list these two gentlemen's names and lists the names, though they are masked, of the various contacts between people who worked within the Trump campaign. If and when those transcripts are ever declassified, we will know exactly who was involved. But I'm going to read you the story from the Huffington Post so that you can get a flavor for exactly what's going on. Anyway, Trump campaign had at least 18 undisclosed contacts with Russians, sources say. 6 of the previously undisclosed contacts were phone calls between advisors of Russian diplomat Sergei Kislyak and Trump. Michael Flynn and other advisors to Donald Trump's campaign were in contact with Russian officials and others with Kremlin ties in at least 18 calls and emails during the last 7 months of the 2016 presidential race, current and former U.S. officials familiar with the exchanges told Reuters. Now, if you recall, it was during that time period that the Russians were taking a super active role in trying to disrupt our elections and to have a direct impact on the elections by generating a lot of false news stories, not only against Hillary Clinton, but against several other Democratic contenders from Florida up and including North Carolina. The previously undisclosed interactions form part of the record now being reviewed by FBI and congressional investigators probing Russian interference in the U.S. presidential election and contacts between Trump's campaign and Russia. 6 of the previously undisclosed contacts described to Reuters were phone calls between advisors of Russian diplomat Sergei Kislyak and Trump, including Flynn, Trump's first national security advisor, 3 current and former officials said. Conversations between Flynn and Kislyak accelerated after the November 8th vote as the two discussed establishing a back channel for communication between Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin that could bypass the U.S. national security bureaucracy, which both sides considered hostile to improved relations, 4 current U.S. officials said. In January, the Trump White House initially denied any contacts with Russian officials during the 2016 campaign. The White House and advisors to the campaign have since confirmed 4 meetings between Kislyak and Trump advisors during that time. The people who described the contacts to Reuters said they had seen no evidence of wrongdoing or collusion between the campaign and Russia in the communications reviewed so far. But the disclosure could increase the pressure on Trump and his aides to provide the FBI and Congress with a full account of interactions with Russian officials and others with links to the Kremlin during and immediately after the 2016 election. The White House did not respond to requests for comment. Flynn's lawyer declined to comment. In Moscow, a Russian foreign ministry official declined to comment on the contacts and referred Reuters to the Trump administration. Separately, a spokesman for the Russian embassy in Washington said, "We do not comment on our daily contact with the local interlocutors." The 18 calls and electronic messages took place between April and November 2016 as hackers engaged in what U.S. intelligence concluded in January was part of a Kremlin campaign to discredit the vote and influence the outcome of the election in favor of Trump over his Democratic challenger, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Those discussions focused on mending U.S.-Russian economic relations strained by sanctions imposed on Moscow, cooperating in fighting Islamic State in Syria, and containing a more assertive China, the sources said. Members of the Senate and House Intelligence Committees have gone to the CIA and the National Security Agency to review transcripts and other documents related to contacts between Trump campaign advisors and associates and Russian officials and others with links to Putin. People with knowledge of these investigations told Reuters. The U.S. Justice Department said on Wednesday it had appointed former FBI Director Robert Mueller as special counsel to investigate alleged Russian meddling in the U.S. presidential campaign and possible collusion between Trump's campaign and Russia. Mueller will now take charge of the FBI investigation that began last July. Trump and his aides have repeatedly denied any collusion with Russia. In addition to the 6 phone calls involving Kislyak, the communications described to Reuters involved another 12 calls, emails, or text messages between Russian officials or people considered to be close to Putin and Trump campaign advisors. One of those contacts was Viktor Medvedchuk, a Ukrainian oligarch and politician, according to one person with detailed knowledge of the exchange and 2 others familiar with the issue. Now, Mr. Medvedchuk, a Ukrainian, in my opinion, obviously is connected to Paul Manafort, because Manafort was the one who I believe received like $10 million to represent the former president of the Ukraine, who was in Vladimir Putin's pocket before he was ousted and fled to Russia. So there's another tie. But Manafort's name is rumored but not specifically mentioned in this particular article. Going on, one of those contacts was Viktor Medvedchuk, a Ukrainian oligarch and politician, according to one person with detailed knowledge of the exchange and 2 others familiar with the issue. It was not clear with whom Medvedchuk was in contact with within the Trump campaign, but the themes include U.S.-Russian cooperation, the sources said. Putin is godfather to Medvedchuk's daughter. Medvedchuk denied having any contact with anyone in the Trump campaign, but they got the transcript, so we know that that's a lie. I am not acquainted with any of Donald Trump's close associates, therefore no such conversation could have taken place, he said in an email to Reuters. In the conversations during the campaign, Russian officials emphasized a pragmatic, business-like approach and stressed to Trump associates that they could make deals by focusing on common economic and other interests and leaving contentious issues aside, the sources said. Veterans of previous election campaigns said some contact with foreign officials during a campaign was not unusual, but the number of interactions between Trump aides and Russian officials and others with links to Putin was exceptional. It's rare to have that many phone calls to foreign officials, especially to a country we consider an adversary or a hostile power, Richard Armitage, a Republican and former Deputy Secretary of State, told Reuters. Okay, folks, so basically, the rest of it just talks about Flynn being fired, Mike Pence denying in January that the Trump campaign representatives had any contact with Russian officials. Then the White House later backtracked from that one and did confirm that Kislyak had met twice with then Senator Jeff Sessions, who later became the Attorney General. Sessions basically lied to the Judiciary Committee that was in charge of his confirmation. So there you have it, folks. The dots are slowly but surely being connected. And that gun is smoking, and it's starting to get blinding how much smoke is coming from that gun. And all we need is for them to tighten the screws on Mike Flynn and tighten the screws on Paul Manafort, because they've already issued subpoenas in both Manafort and Flynn's case to people to get information on exactly what was going on. If they keep tightening the screws, one of them is going to give up Donald Trump. Now, again, I don't know which one it's going to be, but I'm more than sure that one of them definitely will.